Okay, so think about this. What if you had to cross an international border just to get to, well, another part of your own country?
Right.
Or maybe even stranger, what if an entire country was just completely surrounded by another one?
Yeah, it sounds like maybe a map puzzle or maybe just a huge headache, right?
Exactly. But these aren't just thought experiments. They're real places.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about today.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at these geographical curiosities called enclaves.
Yeah, enclaves, they really do defy expectations, and they tell some incredible stories, about history, politics, sometimes just sheer human ingenuity.
So let's pin down the term.
Hmm.
When we say enclave, what exactly are we talking about?
Okay, so simply put, an enclave is a part of one state, or sometimes it's an entire state, that's completely surrounded by the territory of another single state.
Completely surrounded.
Completely. So the only way to get to it, by land at least, is you have to cross through that surrounding country. And what's often fascinating is why they exist. I mean, the reasons often go back centuries, rooted in old treaties or historical quirks.
So the borders today can look, well, pretty unique.
Incredibly unique. And it's probably worth mentioning we should distinguish between what you might call proper enclaves, the ones truly fully surrounded,
Okay.
and then there are practical enclaves. These might be technically connected to their home country on the map, but because of, say, mountains or difficult terrain, the only practical way to reach them is also by going through another country.
I see. Makes sense. So our mission today is really to unpack some of these amazing places,
Mm.
uncover their, sometimes surprising histories, and see what they tell us about borders, how fluid they can be, and also about the people living inside them.
Absolutely. You might need to rethink your mental map a bit after this.
Get ready for some serious geographic oddities then.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's kick off with maybe the most famous example, a whole country inside another country, Vatican City.
The classic example.
It's not just small, it's a city-state, and it's entirely inside Rome, Italy.
That's right. It holds the title smallest recognized state in the world, both in areas it's tiny, 44 hectares, that's about 110 acres.
Wow.
And population, too, only around 840 people. It officially became this independent city-state back in 1929.
It's just amazing to think about a sovereign nation that small, functioning right in the heart of another capital city.
It really is. Its global standing, its distinct identity, it's quite something.
And sticking with Italy, but a little bigger, there's San Marino.
Ah, yes, San Maria.
Another enclave entirely within Italy. This one's about, 61 square kilometers, population around 30,000. But San Marino's story goes way, way back, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. And this is where it gets, really remarkable. San Marino proudly claims, and it's widely accepted to be the oldest surviving sovereign state or republic in the world.
Oldest.
Oldest. Its monastic community supposedly gained independence from the Roman Empire way back in September 301.
301 AD. That's
Yeah.
over 1,700 years of continuous sovereignty.
Exactly. Think about that. Over 17 centuries, it really makes you wonder, how does such a tiny nation, surrounded by much bigger powers, manage to keep its independence for that long?
Right. How?
Well, it's often a mix, clever diplomacy, maintaining neutrality, and maybe just leveraging its unique ancient status. It becomes sort of untouchable in a way.
Fascinating. Okay, so from these tiny micro-states, let's zoom out a bit to a much larger nation, but still entirely landlocked within another. The Kingdom of Lesotho.
Yes, Lesotho, an enclave completely surrounded by South Africa.
And it's significantly larger, right, than the Vatican or San Marino.
Yeah, much larger, about 30,000 square kilometers.
Yeah.
But, put that next to South Africa's vast territory, and it's still just a fraction.
And the population difference.
Big difference. Lesotho has about 2 million people, while South Africa has, over 50 million, maybe 52 million?
Right.
And its independence story is tied up with colonial history, too. It gained independence from the UK in 1966, which was actually after South Africa had already become independent. And this is where you really see the impact. What's fascinating, or maybe challenging, is how these historical lines on a map, often drawn, by colonial powers without much thought for the people on the ground,
Yeah.
created these really unique present-day situations. For Lesotho, being completely surrounded by South Africa has a massive impact on its economy, its infrastructure.
It must be heavily reliant on South Africa then.
For trade routes, for imports, even for jobs for many of its citizens,
Yeah.
it creates this very unique, very deep interdependence.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The colonial legacy shaping the present. And speaking of that, let's shift to some other places where history, strategy, and location collide.
Hmm.
Gibraltar often comes up, doesn't it?
Gibraltar, yeah, probably one of the most famous enclaves for many people. It's a British overseas territory, sits right there in southern Spain, big tourist spot.
Strategically placed, too.
Hugely strategic,
Right.
right at the mouth of the Mediterranean, that narrow strait. It shares a land border with Spain, of course. And its history is, well, contentious. It was captured by an Anglo-Dutch force in 1704 during the War of the Spanish Succession, and then formally ceded to Britain in the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713.
Ah, 1713. So Britain's claim goes back a long way.
A very long way. And unsurprisingly, its status is still, a recurring point of discussion, sometimes tension between the UK and Spain.
And Gibraltar has that really famous airport, right? The one with the road crossing the
Oh,
runway?
yeah, the airport. It's absolutely unique. The main runway, the landing strip, literally crosses Winston Churchill Avenue, which is the main road into the city.
You're kidding.
No, seriously. So every time a plane takes off or lands, they have to close the road. Barriers come down, cars stop, pedestrians wait.
That's wild. Imagine the daily schedule around flight times.
It's quite the operation, a literal stoplight for international air traffic.
Incredible. Okay, staying in that sort of Mediterranean region, but looking south across the water, we have Ceuta and Melilla, two Spanish cities, but they're on the coast of Morocco.
Yes, Ceuta and Melilla. Also fascinating and often in the news for quite difficult reasons.
Their history goes back a while, too.
It does. Ceuta was actually ceded to Spain by Portugal way back in 1668. Melilla's current borders were more established in the 19th century.
But what makes them such hotspots today?
It's primarily about migration. Because these cities are integral parts of Spain, they're part of the European Union.
Oh, right. So from migrants and refugees coming from Africa.
Exactly. They represent a direct land border with the EU, so there's immense pressure, thousands of people trying to cross into these cities seeking asylum or opportunity in Europe. It creates a major humanitarian situation and a huge diplomatic challenge.
And Spain has responded pretty strongly, haven't they, with border security?
Very strongly. It's a heavily fortified border. We're talking, high fences, sometimes double or triple fences, maybe 3 meters high or more, topped with barbed wire.
Wow.
Plus watchtowers, constant patrols, thermal cameras, motion sensors, all sorts of advanced surveillance. And there are coastal patrols, too, with guard ships trying to intercept boats.
So these enclaves, they really become focal points for these much bigger global issues.
Absolutely. They perfectly highlight this complex mix of history, very specific geography, and these massive contemporary challenges like global migration patterns.
Okay, let's shift focus north now, quite a distance away, to Kaliningrad Oblast. Part of Russia, but physically separate.
That's right. Kaliningrad is sandwiched between Lithuania and Poland on the Baltic Sea. It has no direct land connection to the rest of Russia, and its history is, well, incredibly dramatic.
Wasn't always Russian, was it?
Not at all. Historically, this area was Königsberg, the heart of East Prussia. It was German territory through World War I and up until the very end of World War II.
And then?
Then, at the end of WWII, it was occupied by the Soviet Union. The Potsdam Agreement essentially confirmed Soviet administration, and it remained in Russian hands after the USSR dissolved.
And that led to huge changes for the people living there.
Monumental changes, a massive demographic shift. The vast majority of the German population either fled the advancing Red Army, were killed during the fighting, or were expelled afterward.
And
replaced by Russian settlers who were moved in by the Soviet government. So today, the population of over 940,000 people is overwhelmingly Russian.
And its isolation must give it a unique strategic role for Russia.
Absolutely. It's a key military outpost home to Russia's Baltic Fleet headquarters. But that same isolation brings economic and logistical hurdles, needing transit agreements with Lithuania and Poland just for basic land access to mainland Russia.
Right. Another layer of complexity. Now, what about Cabinda? That's part of Angola, but also separated.
Yes, Cabinda. It's an Angolan province, but it's detached from the rest of Angola by a narrow strip of territory belonging to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
So it sits between the two Congos.
Pretty much. It's nestled between the Republic of Congo to the north and the DRC to the south and east. It does have its own coastline on the Atlantic Ocean, though.
And its history is separate from Angola's, too.
Originally, yes. It was incorporated into the Portuguese Empire back in 1885 under a treaty that treated it separately from Portuguese Angola, even though only the Congo River separated them initially. Its current status as an Angolan province was solidified when Portugal granted independence to all its colonies in 1974-75.
How big is it?
It's about 7,270 square kilometers, with the population over 300,000. But here's the crucial thing about Cabinda: oil.
Uh,
It has huge offshore oil reserves, which are incredibly important to Angola's national economy. This wealth, combined with its geographic separation and distinct history, has actually fueled separatist movements there for decades. So it's a politically sensitive region as well.
Oil in isolation, that sounds like a recipe for complexity. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic now to North America for some really quirky border situations. Point Roberts, Washington.
Point Roberts, a classic geographic oddity. It's this small community, just over 1,300 people or so, living on the very southern tip of the Sawasan Peninsula.
The peninsula itself is mostly Canadian.
Exactly. The peninsula extends south from British Columbia, Canada. Point Roberts is that little bit that dips below the 49th parallel, which forms the main U.S.-Canada border there.
So how do you get there from the U.S.?
Well, you can get there directly by boat or small plane from the U.S., but by land. You have to drive north from the U.S., cross the border into Canada, drive across the peninsula, and then cross the border back into the U.S. to enter Point Roberts.
You have to cross an international border twice just to go between two parts of Washington state.
Twice. The border was set way back in 1846 by the Oregon Treaty between the British and Americans, drawing that straight line along the 49th parallel without really accounting for this little dip of land.
Imagine the daily life there. Going grocery shopping must be an international event.
Pretty much. And think about the pandemic border closures. It created enormous challenges for the residents, cutting them off from easy access to the rest of the U.S. Really highlights how these lines on a map impact everyday reality.
And wasn't there talk of just giving it to Canada?
There was. Apparently, back in 1949, there was a serious discussion about ceding Point Roberts to Canada, which, geographically makes perfect sense.
But it never happened.
Never happened. And it's not the only one like that in the U.S. There's the Northwest Angle in Minnesota, too.
Yeah.
Similar situation. You have to go through Canada by land to reach that part of Minnesota.
Just fascinating results of historical map drawing. And this brings us back to that idea you mentioned earlier, practical enclaves.
Exactly. Where the territory is technically connected, but mountains or something else make access totally dependent on crossing into another country.
Like Ostasivis in Spain.
Perfect example. It's a tiny Spanish village, maybe 100 people. On the map, it's part of Spain's continuous territory, way up in the Pyrenees. But it's totally hemmed in by mountains.
So the only road in.
The only road accessible by car comes from the neighboring microstate of Andorra. So even though it's Spain, daily life, access, everything is basically routed through Andorra.
Wow. And there are similar spots in Austria too, right?
Yes. Junkholz and Kleinwalsertal are two well-known Austrian examples. Both are part of Austria, connected to the main territory high up in the Alps.
Like getting there by road.
Requires you to drive into Germany first and then back into these Austrian areas. Junkholz is just a small town, about 300 people. Kleinwalsertal is actually a whole valley, quite a popular tourist area with around 5,000 inhabitants.
So again, legally Austrian, but practically speaking, very tied to Germany for access.
Precisely. It influences everything from, where people shop, maybe emergency services access, local economies. It shows how geography can sometimes override political boundaries in practical terms.
We've covered a lot of ground here, haven't we? A real whirlwind tour.
We have. From the absolute smallest sovereign state in the world to these heavily fortified cities on the edge of continents.
In communities where just visiting the next town over in your own country means pulling out your passport.
Yeah. These places, they really aren't just, abstract lines on a map or historical footnotes. They're living examples of how history, political decisions, sheer geographic chance shape the world and the daily lives of the people living in these unique circumstances. They really force us to think about what borders mean, how arbitrary they can sometimes seem, or how logical in other cases, and just how much they influence everything.
Absolutely. They show how people adapt, how distinct identities are forged in these sort of in-between places.
Definitely.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? Well, maybe the next time you glance at a world map, don't just see the big countries and the neat straight lines.
Right. Look for the little pockets, the unusual bumps, the surprising detours. Think about the stories they might hold.
And perhaps consider this. What other hidden geographic curiosities are still out there waiting to be explored?
And what fascinating stories do they have to tell us about our world, about human resilience, and about how we continue to navigate these lines we've drawn across the globe?